Good afternoon, everyone. We are gathered here today to debate a subject that its main motion is the unity of Arab countries, also known as Arab nationalism. This movement first appeared in late 19th century, then reached its peak in the 1950s. Its main goal is to unite Arab countries under the pretext that they share the same language, ethnicity, culture, etc. Let us first define what a successful union is. A good union, from a pragmatic point of view, is the one that makes transactions between members taking part in it much easier, such as free trading, for example. In opposite of Arab nationalism goals that tend to be more culture-related, it seeks the purification and glorification of Arabs by reducing the influence of non-Arab powers, such as European, Amazigh, or African. So the question that imposes itself here, will this unification achieve any true benefits for the members taking part in it? Let us analyze the main elements behind this ideology and see if they are actually true. The first element, and the most important one, that is, language is far from being the same throughout the Arab world. Us, as Moroccans, do not speak classic Arabic. We speak a dialect that is very distinguished yet complicated, that's only understood and spoken in some parts of the Maghreb. It's the same in the Middle East. They speak very different dialects than us. So the language in our case isn't a very strong point. On the other hand, culture, it's the same story. We have different foods, different music, different celebrations. Even our ethnicity is different. We have Kurdis, Egyptians, Amazigh. We are not alike. We form a variety of ethnic groups. However, we may have the same beliefs, mainly religion. Even though it was rejected as a main element in creating political identity, the fact that most Arabs were Muslims was used by some as an important building block in creating national identity. But is it a strong rope able to pull us together? Well, it is definitely not a healthy way to put people together. The sole role of religion was to create a social cohesion when people centuries and millennia ago didn't have much common sense to drive them into building and developing their own civilizations. So they needed something to fear, something to drive them into working in one community under one common goal. So like the pyramids, they weren't built for the fun of it, as it was a very hard task for the Egyptians. They did it because they believed in the afterlife. They did it seeking the afterlife prize. So anyways, if we want to unite with somebody, it has to be for the pragmatic reasons of it. That makes people's lives much easier. And I believe that the Moroccan people under an all-Arab ruling power will be measurable. Thank you.
Arab nationalism, an ideological dream or a potential reality. A topic that reunites us today and divides us into two opinions. And obviously, as we can see, a notion that is still relevant and debatable even after 53 years of its original defeat in 1967. So I guess that counts for something, right? Dear audience, members of the jury, greetings. So Arab nationalism, I understand how some of you might still be unfamiliar with the concept, its rise and fall, the main idea behind it, so I suggest a quick introduction to its conceptual framework. As simple as it sounds, it was kind of an awakening that dominated the Arab world for most of the 20th century and had a big impact on its current situation. Its core premise was that we, Arab people, are and always have been a nation unified by language, history, and traditions, but long divided by an outside power, and a Western culture to be exact. And of course, it cannot be denied that experiments and attempts of Arab unity to come together as one have not produced effective outcomes in the past. However, it is also very important to acknowledge that now, as in the 21st century, unities among certain nations in the world are very effective and prevailing, and they're doing just fine, economically and politically speaking. So the question here is, why can't we? I mean, a group of United Nations would certainly be more powerful than a group of split nations. That's just like common sense. So if we could just all put our differences aside, and there are not many of those, by the way, and just try to reunite our forces, I'm sure we will overcome whatever problems we're facing and maybe be able to live the life we so long desired and deserve. Because we can be powerful. And you know, the big people, the ones that own the world as if they created it, they don't want us to do that. And they don't want us to even believe in it, because it might translate into the end of an era. Their era, an era in which they had complete control over the world and could do whatever they want with whoever they want and easily get away with it. And that's one of the many reasons why they brainwash you into thinking it's impossible. Chances are, Arab countries in general might reconsider the idea of reunion in order to gain influence and turn constructive entities such as a cohesive stand when dealing with foreign powers in terms of economical and political matters and issues. Our unity could also serve to provide assistance to a nation that is so intimidated by the West and to resolve so many internal disagreements between each other. That's why my teammates and I believe that it's just a matter of time before the world knows another Arab nationalism movement. Because nationalism will always exist as long as a nation feels used by another. And as we know now, Arab countries know more exploitation than they ever did in the past. And I hate to be the one to say it, but other countries don't really care about the Middle East. They just love taking advantage of us, stealing our belongings, and leaving our societies in a very, very bad state. And we still have so many steps ahead of us to achieve complete independence, since so many Arab countries are still reliant on the West, including our country, Morocco. So therefore, in the future, nationalist ideas may become more appealing to Arab countries as they represent our last hope to destroy Western domination and our last chance at establishing solidarity to deter foreign intrusions, because we only got each other's backs. Thank you.
Arab nationalism is a dream, and it will come true. Dreams come true, dreams come true, dreams come true. That sounds pretty much like Disney's fantasies and tales, doesn't it, dear audience? Well, you can already feel the happiness and ataraxia fulfilling in your mind and bliss in your soul. Can you imagine a world where Arabs are creating a union and making beautiful linkings between each other and living a prosperous life? Well, all these ideas belong to the world of Disney, and Disney belongs to a world of pure imagination, or should I say, a world of fake belief. That means that your conviction, dear opposition team, is a fake purpose, a big lie for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode where my team and I will expel false informations and hand you the correct ones that match up with the truth and reality, whether was it sad or happy. In fact, the idea of Arab nationalism was found in the late 19th and early 20th, after the First World War to be more precise. It came after the people in the Middle East saw how strong was Germans, Bulgarians, Italians, etc. with their union. And they believed that doing the same thing would make the Arab community stronger. But no, they missed an important fact, which is that the league that Germany had created with the other countries was because they saw themselves in their societies, in their streets, in their neighborhoods, being a part of a homogeneous group. While in the other side, Arabs are completely missing this characteristic. Come on, guys, let's just not lie to ourselves. Our people have no sense of cooperation, and each one is thinking about himself. But still, Arabs kept hope they kept hope in their hopeless goal. It all started with the United Arab Federation between Egypt and Syria. This unification did not last too long. Why? Because the Syrian people were just simply against it. The second try was about the Arab Federation. It was between Iraq and Jordan. And this unification went nowhere. Why? Because the two countries had completely different insights and visions and objectives, and each one was rejecting and refusing the proposals of the other. And finally, there's the miserable unification of Libya and Egypt, Sudan and Syria, proposed by Muammar al-Gaddafi. This unification, as you may guess, also went nowhere but to the trash and fell apart. Why? Because the leaders of these countries were unable to do one simple task, which is deciding who would be in charge. As you see, these were three times Arab people tried to unify themselves, but they failed. Why? Because Arabs, by their nature, are impossible to unify because of their mentalities. Do you imagine also, dear audience and members of the jury, how bad Arabs were when they tried to unify themselves an era ago, an era where reminiscences of love and compassion still existed, and now they cannot do anything. Like last word. If that is things how go with one of the biggest nations in today's world, how would it be for our doomed Arab nationalism?
Dear audience, dear opponents, members of the jury, greetings. Listen up, for I am here to free you from all of your delusions and endless daydreams about things that will never come true, and hereby present to you the real world. Arab nationalism is just a dream that will never come true. Freeing Palestine is just a dream that will never come true. Ending world hunger is just a dream that will never come true. World peace is just a dream that will never come true. I'm sorry, but don't you sense a bit of a pattern here? Dear opponents, do you see where this is going? Do you understand that that's what you're trying to make sense of right now? Well, all I see in any of these statements is an unsound amount of pessimism, fear of taking a step forward, and hopelessness. All I see is people admitting defeat, being okay with the less than mediocre state that they're living in, and diving deeper and deeper into their inferiority complex and insecurities. Members of the government, by defending today's topic, you're basically saying that people shouldn't dream when their goals seem unrealistic, right? Well, allow me to tell you otherwise. Dreams are what make us different from other living beings. We dream, we desire, and we deliver. Just think about the world if we didn't dream. We would still be living in the Stone Age. Our curiosity and desire to do something that seems practically impossible is what brought us a long, long way. And I could sit here and give you countless examples of artists, scientists, celebrities, and the world's wealthiest people that achieved great things when it was the least expected of them. But to not stray too far away from today's topic, I'll give you an example that goes just perfectly with it. Can you make a guess what that is, your opponents? Anything? Well, obviously it is the European Union. I guess you mentioned it before. As we all know, after the Second World War, Europe was in a troubled state. Two bloody wars had been fought on the continent. European countries had been making war against each other since the Middle Ages. The relations between the countries were extremely poor, and trust me when I say that they were 1,000 times worse than the relations between Arab countries at the moment. And yet, will you look at them now? They still managed to push through, pull themselves together, and be there for each other, no matter their differences. And I say, no matter their differences. And so, they created what would become one of the world's most elite forces, and would guarantee the prosperity of European countries. That is all because of their one shared ideal, a united, peaceful, and prosperous Europe. Well, it is our turn to do the same. And I dare you, dear opponents, to look me in the eyes and tell me that it is not what all Arabs want, a united, peaceful, and prosperous Arab League. God, it feels so good just to say those words, but our dear opponents are trying to shut us down. They're telling us that we shouldn't dream, that we should be stagnant, that we should be okay with the mediocrity that we're living in. But don't you worry, because me and my teammates will most certainly not allow that. Because we believe in the power of the rising generation, and in that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Dear leader of the opposition, I think I heard you claim that we had been really powerful in the past. And well, I think that the dear leader of the opposition has fallen into the misconception of thinking that this palmarès is anywhere near Arab nationalism. And you gave no examples of that. What could it be? Ottoman empires, not Arab. Abbasian Amawi, not Arab, Muslims. And deputy leader of the opposition, your answer is in my speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I am truly surprised and astonished by the persistence and the consistency of some people to throw us back into one of those immoral and historically proven wrong subjects that don't even fit with today's world. A subject that our grandfathers dreamed of and considered a solution for their underdevelopment. Little did they know that their dream will unfortunately not going to take place. But now we do. We know that it did not happen. It's most certainly not happening right now, and it will not happen simply because it is quite an impossible task to achieve the two main objectives of the Arab nationalist movement: unity and independence. Our grandfathers were based on a myth. They thought that unifying people who talk the same language will give them back their power. But language surely is not the only thing that matters, because if it did, we would see 3, 4, or 5 countries in the entire world. No, there are considerable obstacles along the path. The fact that there's going to be a leadership means that there's going to be a leader, which is a hard thing for Arabs to actually agree on. Plus, if you guys did your research well, you would know that in the times where Arab nationalism occurred, there was something called pan-Islamism, which is another movement much more powerful, much more popular, and whose principles are not only based on language. Now, I'm not going to talk about pan-Islamism because obviously it's not what concerns us, but if people were to choose between one of these two movements, they would go for pan-Islamism. Though these two are the least likely to happen nowadays, but pan-Arabism has the lowest chance. Ladies and gentlemen, dear opposants, please do not misunderstand us. I, personally, as an Arab, would be proud, honored, and would love to see for once and witness the development of our Arab countries. I would love to see them shining and not living in the shadows of other nations. But nowadays, people must be convinced that the Arab nationalism is simply not the way. It is not going to happen, as it is not going to succeed. Instead of focusing on things that are more palpable, things that we can be sure to touch, our grandfather used to imagine themselves into something that I like to think of as a reality TV show or a fairy tale where Arabs will unite and they live happily ever after. But you see, this is not a fairy tale, and this is not a reality TV show. This is reality. A reality where unifying Morocco and Algeria seems like an impossible task to achieve, let alone unifying whole 22 Arab countries who are known for not being able to stand each other, who are known for not being able to cooperate with each other. And of course, Morocco and Algeria is not the only example testifying to that. And I don't need to, and I have no intention to bore you guys with a very long list. To bore you guys with a very long list that we all know and agree on. Ladies and gentlemen, before I go to rest my feet, I would like you to clarify me something. Um, ah.
Ladies and gentlemen, before anything else, I would like to express my gratitude for giving us this opportunity to debate about a topic that concerns us all as the rising generation. And how it pains me to hear that some of us, the youngsters, already are using words like will never happen, just a dream, just a fairy tale, and such pessimistic ideas. But don't you worry, dear audience. Fortunately, my teammates and I today are here for the very purpose of saving you from our dear opponents' pessimistic ideas. Dear audience, my teammates and I, as my teammates already made clear, Arab nationalism today is a must. And saying it will never happen will only put more and more obstacles into achieving it. It's no secret to anyone anymore that the big majority of Arab countries have been facing a lot of obstacles and issues that are preventing us from developing. And such as unemployment, unstable political systems, and poverty and employment. And without even mentioning that there are more wars in the Middle East than there are in any place else in the world. Dear opponents, it would be too naive to think that we can overcome all of these issues by ourselves. Because after all, as the famous writer G.K. Rowling has said, we are only as strong as we are united, as we are weak, as divided. What I'm trying to say is that all the difficulties and all the problems we are facing as Arab countries and people are only more reasons that will push us to come into an understanding and put our hands together for more development. Well, I don't know about you guys, but my blood boils just thinking that we are missing so many opportunities and chances and not getting a hold of the better life conditions that we deserve as the Arab countries. Just by saying that no, Arabs can get along, isn't that just a stereotype? Aren't you just saying stereotypes that other countries are assuming about us? Well, I'm tired of all of these stereotypes and things and negative image about us. But because if you didn't know, this is all a policy and a plotting of the first world countries preventing us from uniting. Because if we actually come to uniting our forces, the Arab countries, who are exactly 22 countries, make a total of 13 million square kilometer, the second largest surface on Earth after Russia. And also, we are making as a whole union 30% of oil producing in the world. Just imagine the force we would hold. By the way, this is all according to Wikipedia. Just imagine the whole power we are holding just by our oil and in a huge surface. And also, above all, an Arab national. Thank you.
Arab nationalism? What's a joke? I would really appreciate to live with you guys in this perfect world with angels, with kind people, where people are ready to forgive each other and share everything they have just because they're speaking the same language or having the same ethnicity. But let me tell you that the reality is different and completely different, and that your philosophy makes you live in a dream that will never become true. Ladies and gentlemen, we're living in a world in which politics had replaced philosophy, in which politics have no relationship to morals, since it is the art of looking for trouble, finding out whether it exists or not, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying wrong remedies. Arab nationalism is the ideology which says that Arab people are going to be united just because they're speaking the same language or having the same ethnicity, which means that you're trying to group about 420 million people just because they're speaking the same language or having the same ethnicity, something which seems to be illogical, impossible, and unachievable, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm gonna tell you why. It's not me who says this is the truth which had been proven by the human being history. As my friend said before, when the Egyptian leader Jamal Abdel Nasser decided to unify Arab people based on their having the same language and ethnicity, and he just started giving these exciting speeches, just like you do, my dear members of the opposition, about the victory, about the glory, about the prophecy, about petrol and gas, and everybody was amazed and really amazed when sadly, and they even passed to action and unified Syria and Egypt, when sadly everything fell down. The same story happened with the Iraq leader Faisal first. The same story happened with the Lebanon leader Muammar Gaddafi. And I'm gonna tell you why. Basically, the problem was that the Arab people were not able to agree for a leader, as well as there was no mutual benefits between Arab countries, as well as there was difference of political ideologies, which made them getting more distant than familiar. In our words, my dear members of the opposition, having the same language and ethnicity was not sufficient to make the Arab people becoming or given an Arab nationalism. Now, let's pass to another point, my dear members, ladies and gentlemen, which is that Arab nationalism says that it wants to group Arabs into only Arabs, which means that it's going to exclude all other ethnicities like Amazigh, like Kurds, and so on, which means in one country which is containing difference and variety of ethnicities like Morocco, there's going to be a separation between Arabs and non-Arabs, which is going to make troubles in the country itself, and which means that while trying to group Arab people, we're going to make them more distant, and we're going to create wars and troubles. Which means, briefly, that Arab nationalism, yes, it's a dream, but a dream which can make the destruction of the Arab world, which means that it's a dream that will never become true. Thank you.
Member of the government, it's not a world full of angels and dreams, but it's rather a world full of ambition, which you seem to lack, actually. And I see also a bit of contradiction in your argument, since Prime Minister defined Arab nationalism as a group of countries that have the same language and religion, etc. And then we have Deputy Prime Minister giving the example of European countries, which, by the way, are still union, right? Whatever. It is true that the wave of protests that represented an Arab Spring, which you forgot to mention, in 2010-2011 failed to effect a full-blown surge of democracy and social peace. However, it helped to affect and shake the foundation of the Arab state. And because agency matters, Arab people, we will continue to work toward becoming agents of change. The following sentences are the words of the expert Maha Yahya and are taken from a Wilson Center article. She's director of the Carnegie of Middle East Center. This generation can make the difference. I've seen the kids on the streets since 2015 with the Youth Sync movements. They're tenacious, they're politically mature, far more mature than their parents' generation. They know what they want and they're going after it. I look at the generation across the region, and what attracts them is more about rights. It's more about principles and what gets us the kind of countries we want. And then I would like to pursue with the quote of Gamal Abdel Nasser, which was said, by the way, in the 20th century. Unity does exist among Arab people. Differences exist between regimes and governments. Now, reading that from a 21st century perspective, regimes and governments have known quite a development. But what's more important is what unites us. And what unites us today has grown bigger and stronger. Stronger than culture, history, religion, even geographical convergence. While doing my researches, there was something I would find all over again and again. The role of United States. Whether the talk is about Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, whatever, their fate was always bounded to whatever decision the USA would take. Marionettes. That's how Arab countries are treated. What unites us today is the accumulation of our rights being taken away from us. For some, it was their homes. For others, it was their families. In some situations, even their countries. I'm Palestine. I'm Yemen. I'm Syria. I'm Lebanon. I'm full of anger, patience, ambition. I have a dream. I quote, إن النصر أمل والأمل حركة والحركة فكر والفكر فهم وإيمان وهكذا فكل شيء يبدأ بالإنسان. Victory is an action and action is a movement. Movement is an ideology and ideology comes from understanding and believing. And that way everything starts with a human. End of the quote. أنا هذا الإنسان. I am that human. And as Luther King said once, I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations, I still have a dream. And my dream becomes true once I put my mind into it. That is now. Thank you.
Dear opponents, you mentioned how successful the European Union is. If you reflect on its history, it started by free trading, not common language. And also you said that we can't be strong alone. We'll just have a look at Japan that was bombed just 80 years ago. Dear opponents, I believe that our arguments were loud and clear, but maybe throwing in some more sparks will clarify our position even further. As long as Arab leaders sip their tea discussing the Palestinian cause, Arab nationalism is dead. No one truly cares about it anymore. Once it aspired to unite Shia and Sunnah under one secular banner, it has become a largely vanished cause. A largely vanished cause. One thing. Oh, it's 1 minute.
Dear government whip, you clearly weren't paying attention to what I had to say because I never mentioned something about Arab nationalism being successful in the past. In fact, I just think we should give it another chance because the Arab nationalism I'm talking about is the one that fits the 21st century. So take, for example, secularism, which was started by initially Christian Arab thinkers and leaders like Constantine Zoraik and Boutros el-Bortani, who lived in a very Muslim environment but still believed that our nation should apply the secular legal framework to ensure justice and harmony within the Arab society. And it was in fact very peaceful, very modern, and with no religious beliefs involved. Thank you.
Young lady, I just want to tell you that you should look back at who you are giving as an example, because Gamal Abdel Nasser, when he unified Egypt and Syria, all Syrian people, they observed that their resources had been taken, and they've been absorbed because of a parasite which was Gamal Abdel Nasser. And to conclude this whole subject, I want to tell you that Arab nationalism is a hope that died with our grandparents. And it's time to admit that each country has to unite itself and unify its own people to go further. In this whole galaxy, no one is going to help the other. No one is going to get bothered to help you to fix your problems and your issues. Believe it or not, as Mickey Mouse had never been a real mouse, Arab nationalism will never be a real union.
Dear government whip, I'm sorry to inform you of this, but you seem to have a really big inferiority complex. And when it comes to the relations between Arab countries, we cannot deny that there has been a history of tension and conflicts, but that is a fact. But you know what also is a fact? All of these most of these conflicts, if not all of them, are nothing but the product of Western and first world countries trying to create division between Arab countries. And why, you may ask? That is because they fear us. They know that if we came united, we would be such a force and that we would be able to defeat them. And that's why they're putting so much effort into bringing us down. And I'm sorry, but you just cannot deny that. You cannot.
Dear opponents, you literally started putting words into our mouths. He talked briefly about the Arab Union, and she talked about the Arab nationalism. And you mixed everything and got out with a conclusion of contradiction. Really? Is this really how desperate you are? Come on, people. And I just want to express that I am truly sad that my question was not heard before. So I want to do it now. Why do you think that the Arab nationalism, why do you think that it wasn't possible to revive Pan-Arabism? Since it was a subject that occurred in the past century and died in the same past century. So why do you think we didn't see the revitalization of Pan-Arabism? Thank you so much.
Dear opponents, especially the government whip, you kept bringing up the past that history doesn't. And I want to tell you today that history doesn't define our future. Things change, humans change, conditions also change. If you think we can't unite because of our language differences and the non-common things we want, how do you explain the European Union that was in a bloody war just some years before they actually united? Also, don't act like we Arab countries are the enemies of each other, because the real enemy is the countries that are brainwashing you into believing we can't be united. And because after all, thank you.
My dear members of the opposition are still confusing between a union and a nationalism. European Union is a union, but not a nationalism. In our part, ladies and gentlemen, you are supposed, we're going to use the absurd reasoning to prove you that this is not, that our position is the right position. So you are, my dear members of the opposition, supposing that Arab people are going to be unified based on their having the same language ethnicity, which means that their language and ethnicity, that Arab people are going to be united just because they're having the same language ethnicity. But the contradiction is that Arab people are not having anymore the same language ethnicity, because their dialect is different, their culture is different, their traditions are different, which means there is no that culture common point that you're basing on it, your theory, which means that you're based on something which is not anymore true. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, that Arab nationalism is a dream, but a dream that will never become true.
I don't get it how all you can talk about is language and ethnicity, while no one of us actually said that Arab nationalism should become true because we have the same language and ethnicity, because we don't, obviously. And I'll give you a simple example of India. Take, for example, there are more than 100 languages and religions and, I don't know, like rituals, and they're still gathered as one. What do you have to say about that? And still, we can say that Indians, they are capable of understanding each other, even though their languages are different. They are still capable of living together and being one and being a developing country, even though they have many problems actually, and they are so different from each other. Still, they are, I'd say, a good example of nationalism, even despite of the diversity, and they're still developing. Thank you.